Welcome, Anuj. Very
Thank you.
glad to have you here with us today, and Happy New Year.
Thank you, Raghav. Happy New Year to you too.
Thank you, thank you. And I'm glad to be joined by basically the guru of financial structures, complex lending,
That's
trust structures as well.
very, very kind of you. Yeah. I don't know if I'm a guru, but yeah, getting this, learning.
Yeah, no, but we work very closely together, and I'm really happy about the partnership we've formed.
Absolutely. Me
How
too.
we were able to help our clients get to their goals, scale portfolios, get into their ideal unoccupied homes. So
Yeah,
it's great work that we do together, and I'm
absolutely.
again very happy you're joining us today.
Thanks for having me, man. It's a good opportunity.
No worries, man. And today, just want to touch on a few topics, a few hot topics as well,
Hmm.
about predictions, what we're thinking about the property market as well,
Yeah.
and just want to understand, from our views, buyers agency, mortgage broking, what we're seeing, what kind of trends we're seeing in the
Hmm.
market today.
Hmm. Yeah.
Because I've been really wanting to talk about our clients,
Hmm.
what we're seeing in our client strategy calls, what
Yeah.
we're kind of experiencing from new clients coming on board, because I'm feeling a lot of frustration
Yeah.
from clients. I'm feeling a lot of, people unhappy about the current lending environment with interest rates being this high.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are struggling with affordability. Why I'm talking about this particularly is if you look at property prices the last 10 to 15 years,
Hmm.
you're basically seeing that property prices are far outgrowing the rate of which wage growth is increasing.
100%.
People in Sydney today, they might be on $200,000 to $300,000, household
Hmm.
incomes,
Yeah.
and they're struggling to buy a property of $1.5 million.
Yeah.
And if they can get the borrowing for it, they can barely make those repayments.
Yeah.
So we're having a lot of conversations about, does this strategy work for you?
Mm.
Are you able to, service this loan?
Mm.
Are you able to live a lifestyle and
Yeah.
have that own occupied home in Sydney or some areas in Brisbane or Melbourne?
Mm.
Or are you better off using a different strategy?
Mm.
It might be reinvesting, it might be, making some capital growth in other areas in Australia as well, and then, coming back to a market that you want to live in.
Mhm.
But these are very difficult conversations we're having with cost of living.
Yeah.
And overall, I'm just thinking a lot about, are people really happy in the 9 to 5s, and
Mm.
are they able to kind of, make sure that they can increase their wealth,
Mm.
protect their wealth in the future?
Mm.
And we're actually having a lot of conversations about making sure you're actively investing your money
Yeah.
in assets that will, again, help you grow
Mm.
financially in the future
Mm.
and have no risk.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of risk to 9 to 5 today, and,
Yeah.
and a lot of people are starting to realize
Yeah.
that it's not going to get you to your ultimate financial
Yeah.
goals.
Well, not anymore, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you seeing similar trends in the market?
Yeah, 100%, man. Like I still remember like when I was in uni,
Mm.
like my parents would say, when you're on a six-figure salary, you're doing really well. That's like a big milestone. But I think today, that's kind of almost a minimum if you want to kind of live in Sydney, right? Because things are so expensive. And I totally resonate with what you're saying on the owner occupier, because I think, call it the Australian dream. Back in the day, it was kind of like, work hard, get a good job, save up, and the first property you buy is the property to live in. But as you said, prices of sort of the properties, especially in the areas where most people want to live, have kind of gone up so much, and real wage growth is so far behind. So
Yeah.
I think trying to reconcile that gap has been very difficult and frustrating for people, because I don't think it's a big ask to want a house to live in if you're working really hard. But I think unfortunately the way things have sort of turned out now is that we're having to sort of rethink, what's the pathway to get to that owner rock, and it's no longer a straight path, you know. So, and a lot of my clients that I've spoken with, they're really feeling that frustration, and so we've kind of had to pivot to a different strategy, kind of what you were talking about. It's like whether it be rent investing or rather than buying that owner rock as that first property, maybe you go out and buy a few investments which are more affordable in different areas, which can grow at a fast rate, and then maybe that's the means for you to then sell those, or pull out equity or do other things with those properties to buy the owner occupier property later. But I think that's it's a new thing, and not everyone is familiar or comfortable with it. And I think those conversations are quite hard, because that mindset of I want to get that house to live in, and it being a very straightforward sort of process is kind of gone now. So yeah, everything what you're saying, man, like I've been seeing all of that in sort of my space as well, with my clients, and we're having very similar conversations on, we're trying to get creative. How do we, help people, get that dream? And it's not even just for my clients, for myself as well. I think, we both work pretty hard, right? But it's not been like an easy journey. But I feel like if you have the right support, right team, and you're willing to try things and be open to, sort of strategies, there are ways now, albeit, a little bit complicated, but you can get there. Like the dream is still possible. It's just a little bit more complicated now. So
100%.
that's kind of what I'm seeing. Yeah.
Yeah, I love how you mentioned, you're talking about high school.
Yeah.
I remember I was thinking, if I made $100,000 a year,
Yeah.
I made it.
Yeah.
If you look back 20 years ago, that $100,000 today is probably equivalent to maybe $250,000
Yeah.
annual salary,
Mm.
in that range.
Yeah.
Inflation, cost of living,
Yep.
rising prices of goods, groceries, everything.
Yeah.
It's made everything so difficult.
Yeah.
Not just
100%.
for housing, but for literally just day-to-day living.
Yeah.
And then it also makes me think that there's so much more kind of guidance we give to our clients on, not just what work can do for you, but it's really about ensuring that you can live the life you live, but there's so much ways to really put that money to use at the same
Yeah.
time. So don't rely on just 9 to 5, because now people are seeing it's not
Yeah.
getting them to where they want to be.
100%. Yeah.
And we were just talking about this before. We were just having a coffee before, and we're talking about impacts of AI.
Yeah.
Are a lot of these jobs going to be available in 5-10 years time?
Yeah.
People are working so hard now, and I think people are starting to realize, because I've seen a lot of clients who are proactively coming to us, understanding the need to put their money into assets that have a likely chance of growing.
Yeah.
And I think this educational piece is going to become something that's so important the next few years, and then it all becomes very vital to how we can help clients succeed, because it's such a big task we have right now.
It is,
and people are stressed again.
Yeah.
So how's that impacting your work at the moment? I know obviously from an unoccupied point of view, people are kind of confused there, but are clients coming to you to kind of understand as well from just wealth generation perspective? Are they looking at opportunities there and how to kind of structure the loans or the right financial structures to come into? Because that's a lot of the kind of strategies we implement for clients.
100%. Yeah. No, look, I totally agree. So I think, look, even sorry, just to come back to the inflation part of it, we talk about coffee. When I started my grad job, it was 2018, right?
Yeah.
I used to get my coffee $3, right? So I'm like, I get a $3 coffee, great. My coffee's $6 now, right? So it's doubled. My wage definitely hasn't doubled, right? And the thing with the 9 to 5, I think at a point you'd work your job, it'd give you enough income to access debt, and then you'd buy these properties, which would then you kind of I think 70% of an Australian's household's wealth is in the house that they live in, right? It's a large amount, right? But I think now that's getting more and more difficult, right? So I think with the 9 to 5 as well, one thing a friend of mine told me, which really resonated with me, and he was earning like a lot of money, like good money, and he said to me that tomorrow your wage can stop for whatever reason, right? You could get, God forbid, but you could get injured, you could be unable to work. What happens then, right? Salary can disappear.
You can get made redundant.
Yeah, well, you can get made redundant. And just touching on AI, I think we're seeing, probably in the next 5 years, we're going to see one of the biggest revolutions, in almost a century, right? It's going to be huge. And change is scary, but it's also inevitable, right? And I think we have to embrace it. And I think that's the challenge we're facing somewhat. It's like, well, how do we navigate that side of it? And how do we help you become financially secure through not just the job? And that's a lot of the conversations we're having. So it's about, I think, acquiring or amassing, income producing assets. I think that's really important. And when you look at Australia, just the way, the way the tax system's set up, whatever it is, right? Property, if you, risk adjusted, it's just the best asset class in Australia to make wealth, right? Like from what we've seen, right? It's not financial advice, right? But that's what I've seen, right? And my journey. And I think, if you talk to people, I bought a property in 2010 and what that's done for them now, the growth is enormous. So I think, when it comes to your job, it's important to strive. But there's a saying I love, which is like, you work hard for your money. You have to make sure your money is working hard for you, right? Because I think it's less about the income now. The income is important, don't get me wrong, but where you put that income is very critical, right? And when you talk about, property, and you can typically get 7 times, leverage or lending on, what you're earning. If you're putting your income into that, and you're using, lending to help you get a larger amount of money, then when you do make that money, you're also gonna, increase it because you're getting 7 times that return, right?
That's right.
So I think that versus, some other ways, like, when I have money in a savings account, right? You should have money in savings, right? But if it's only like 3%, you're almost kind of losing money, right? When you think about it against
what's
inflation.
What's rate of inflation?
Right? Yeah, exactly. Because, Australian dollar is losing its currency. All currencies in the history of time have gone to zero, right? And I'm not saying, we're close to that, but money does lose its value. So when you invest in assets, and I think in Australia, specifically hard assets, like property, I think that's been a gateway, and it's going to be very, very vital to securing the financial well-being for people in the future. And I think the evidence is overwhelming, which is why we have this frenzy for property in Australia. Like Australia is, property, the popularity of property as an asset class, Australia is like in the world right up there, right?
It's the backbone of the economy.
Exactly, right. And the way it's set up, there's a lot of benefits to doing it.
Correct.
So, but I think where people can get stuck is you need to make sure you do it right. And ideally, you need to make sure you do it right from the start. Now, if you've already sort of started your journey and you've already bought a few properties or something like that, that doesn't mean you can't fix it. There's ways of doing it. But I think right now, when things are changing so much, you know, we live in such a dynamic environment, all this new tech, then I think it's very important to have people who, you know, spend their day to day and have done this for years and years and years, having them in your corner to guide you, right? So I think when we think about anything, when we think about, you know, okay, I need to check out my health, you go see a professional, you go see a doctor, right? So, but when it comes to building wealth, I think sometimes we hesitate to go see a professional, right? And
it's an awkward topic sometimes.
Yeah, it's an awkward topic. And I think that culture's starting to unwind a bit. But I think, like, you know, even the work we've done together, like I've seen like what a stark impact it has on people who decide to go and get the help versus people who try to go at it themselves. Not to say you can't do it, but it's also, you know, time is an important thing, right? What we specialize in and we do as a profession, we can do very quickly versus if you try to learn it sort of yourself. But I think coming back to this whole sort of wealth creation piece, I think it's very important that you invest your money in the right assets. And you do it early because, you know, they say the best time to invest was yesterday, right? So
hand on heart, I had a client call this morning, and at the end of the call, the prospect asked me, "Do you truly believe it's a good time to invest?" As he said, "When would you ideally invest given the market conditions right now?" Well, I said, "Given everything I've said to you yesterday." Like, and I literally sent them, like, you know, data, like property being $11.2 trillion of this being worth $11.2 trillion today. It's a backbone of the economy. We're in a massive supply shortage. It's a human need. So you can't go wrong. Long term, like I said, the worst case scenario, the highest risk people have investing in property today is it might not grow straight away. That's literally it. But we've done, you know, all the due diligence. We've got you into assets that should outperform the market. But over time, it will perform. And you can't have a safer investment. But I definitely agree with everything you're saying as well.
No, I think, like, if you think about it, where there's so much wealth in property, right? Like in Australia, it's just, if you look at it, you know, the average over 20 years, it just keeps going up and up and up, right? And, you know, there's been doomsday people saying, oh, it's going to end, it's going to end. Well, how is it going to end? Like, because my view is if there is a serious correction in the property market, our whole economy is basically jeopardized, right? And as you said, we have a supply shortage, and there's no shortage of people who want to come and live in Australia as well, right?
Especially
so the demand is there as well, right? So I think it is safe, but I think, I think it's a big thing, and I think you need to take your time and, you know, research it, talk to the right people, and do it well. But if you do it well, and you know, like you said, like hand on heart for me as well, I've seen case in point how it's actually changed people's lives, and a lot of it's about mindset. Like, I think just opening up, you know, people's mind to what they can sort of, you know, achieve through investing in the right things. I think that's sort of not commonplace yet. I think now it's coming because you hear some people, you know, quote these eye-watering numbers that I bought a property for like 800K is worth $3 million now, right? But yeah, I think coming back to our original point, so 9 to 5, like, work hard, but make sure your money's working for you as well. Because, you know, true financial freedom, I think, lies in, you know, if you're passionate about your job, if you love your job, right? You know, I think a lot of people say, but if you have income producing assets, and then, you know, that for you to work is kind of a choice, and then you still decide to work, I think that's amazing. But I think you want to build that up so that, you know, you have the option to do other things, right? And that's only going to come from you building, you know, your investments.
Live a lifestyle you're free. Free to do what you want to do when you want to do it.
And if you're free to do what you want to do, and you decide, I still want to do my job, you know, good on you, right?
Correct.
But I think having that option is really important, and I don't think it's an impossibility anymore. I think
100%.
If you do the right things and you're a bit patient, I think anyone can achieve it.
Yeah. And Anuj, so walk me through this. So I think we've talked a lot about how great property can be as an asset class, how it can help you, and we both agree. So we've got a client. They probably hate their job. Honestly, we work with, you know, we've worked with more than 150 clients now. I think, hand on heart, 9 out of 10 of them, 9 out of every 10 clients do not like the 9 to 5 work. So we will obviously, you know, educate them on power of property, investing, and then we come to you. And now the fun work begins, because we understand how can we scale, or how can we get this person in the right asset from a financial structure perspective, how we can essentially help them grow in a very safe manner. So I know we've done this plenty of times, but for someone out there listening right now who might be a bit unsure about the process, or might not understand, you know, how important financial structures are, like you said, from the very start. Can you just talk a bit about how we go through the right implementation of the structures, understand client requirements, and how we can help them pretty much get to their goals.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I truly believe like building a property portfolio, it's a game of finance. Like I think it plays a really critical role because let's be honest, if you had access to unlimited money, you'd buy unlimited properties, right? There's no shortage of opportunities out there. I think where people get caught up is with buying property. If you go in too early and you don't set it up right, you kind of exhaust your borrowing power. Now, to open up borrowing power is really hard. Like right now, as a rough guide, it's a sort of, if you're talking about borrowing power for an owner-occupier property, it's a 1 to 5 multiple, which means like if I earn an extra $1 at my job, that means I'm getting an extra $5 of borrowing power. So just to put that in perspective, if you completely utilize all your borrowing power, like the lending you can get from a bank, and you want to go out and buy a property for like for 500K, you need a $400,000 loan, right?
Correct.
That means you have to, increase your income very significantly. To get a $500,000 loan, you have to increase your income by almost, for owner-occ by $100,000 almost,
correct.
Right?
That's right.
So that's the big thing. I think when people...
Can I just say, this is why a lot of people get stuck at that 1 or 2 max property.
Absolutely, yeah.
70% of investors get stuck at 1 or 2 properties max. And sorry, just go on. But I just want to make that point.
No, it's a very good point. And just building on that, if you go in too fast, too hard, unwinding it becomes very complicated, right?
Correct,
because maybe you have to sell it off, but then there's also costs involved. Like if you're going to buy a new one, okay, I've got to pay stamp duty again. I've got to do this. I've got to pay my establishment fees again. So I think that's why getting it done early correctly is really important. Now, coming back to the, the structuring and things like that. Yeah, like I think what's basically happened is in the credit cycle, credit cycle being, it's easy to get loans and then it gets hard. I think because the prices have gone up so much, people are finding it hard to get loans. The banks, while
prices have kept going up with higher rates.
I think it's been hard to get lending, but the banks are opening up some pathways to help people do that journey now. There is certain policies, by setting up corporate entities, be a company or a trust, and buying the right assets. If you're a bit smart about that, and where you put the properties, there's ways to kind of maximize your borrowing power on doing that, right? And I think that the key here though is that these strategies, they don't just increase your borrowing power straight away. What they're fundamentally good at is allowing you to sort of recycle your borrowing power or preserve it at a certain level, right?
Correct, yeah.
So, but look, there's been cases as well where someone's come to us, they've maxed out their borrowing power, and they're like, okay, look, I want to do this, like I want to restart. What do we do? And there is still ways to go back. You can unwind and restart and start clean, right?
Yeah.
But I think where you have to be careful is, again, there's a lot of costs associated with selling and buying. So you want to do it right from the start and get the right help. And we've seen, I'll give you an example. One of my clients is a very senior guy. He was a banker. He's earning really good money, and he approached a bank, a domestic bank. I won't name him, and he's like, oh, I want to get some lending. I want to buy a few properties. So he'd already had a few properties, and the maximum he could get was 700K, right? Which is still a good amount. And then he approached, and then we ended up meeting, and he started having a chat with me, and he's like, look, I want to build a property portfolio. What's your thoughts on it? And I started talking to him. I'm like, well, have you got your loan approved? He's like, I can get 700K. I'm like, look, there's probably something I can do to maybe help you, because let's have a chat. And we caught up, and then we went through this whole structuring process, and we talked about how to do it, and and we'll get to cash for deposits in a sec.
Of course, yeah.
With the borrowing side, we talked to him, and what we actually ended up for that client, he's now he's bought 3 properties for $700,000 each.
There you go. Yeah.
Right. Whereas previously he would only get 1. Right. Now
I'm assuming there's some creative structuring going on.
There's a bit of creative structuring going on, but like I think it's also you've got to buy the right properties, right? And I think that's where you guys are very critical in this whole process, because I see a lot of people who they get hold of these strategies and they're able to sort of implement them, but when you at the end of the day, there's a very real repayment you have to pay each month, right?
Correct,
and if you're not setting this stuff up right, and you're not buying the right assets, which are generating a certain amount of income or in a certain area, other things like that, then you will get stuck, even if you are using the complicated strategies, right?
Of course.
We don't have unlimited money to keep paying the banks, right?
Every client's different.
Yeah,
there's a cash flow perspective, there's a capital growth perspective,
Absolutely.
They have their own risk appetites, and that's where we work together to understand those
100%.
requirements, and obviously you can work on the borrowing.
And I think that's our expertise, right? That's what we do. But I think it goes hand in glove in the sense that, okay, you sit with a client, you find out what they want, and they're like, okay, this is how we solve the borrowing power. Okay, in order to make this make sense, we need these kind of properties, and you're like, okay, like, we'll do both of those things for you, right? And if I was to do this alone, I probably would have had time maybe 5 years ago where I wasn't sort of as sort of well versed in this. And if I try to do what we're doing right now, I'd have no idea, right? Like it's very difficult because it is a very complicated and nuanced thing that we're doing, right? But I think like we said, in today's environment where things are difficult, it's very important to be able to, kind of think outside the box. If you, want to outperform and you want to sort of, build that portfolio in the current environment, you have to be a little bit creative. And that's sort of where we help. And yeah, so like on the borrowing power side of things, like getting loans from the bank, I think you buy the right property. And then also, yeah, we help you with the structure, whether it's a company, buying under a company, buying under a trust, setting it up in a certain way. And also going to the right lenders, right? I don't think people realize this as well. Different lenders, every single lender has different policies. The borrowing power is
very
like,
true.
We've seen this. We talked to one bank, they're like, oh, this guy can get, 100K. And another bank's like, we'll give him $2 million, right?
That's
like,
right. Yeah.
So every client's unique. And that's why approaching the right lender is really, really important as well. So that's one side of what we do. We work with 70 lenders, right? So somewhere there's someone who can help you, right? So I think that's an important piece as well. And so yeah, setting it up right, approaching the right lender, sequencing it. These are all things which it's taken. I've been in this sort of lending, property lending space for 10 years.
Correct.
And I've really only in the last sort of 2 or 3 years really sort of honed down, crystallized, and refined that strategy where it's making a lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
So it takes a lot of time, but now it's there, it's working. When we talk to clients, we understand the needs and objectives. There's a pathway there almost every single time. I don't think we've ever had a time where we'd be like, no, we can't help you, right?
Correct,
There's always been a way forward, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes we have to be a bit patient. Sometimes we can go a bit more aggressive. It just depends, right? So I think that's,
we're very solution oriented. That's the main thing.
Yeah, I have a problem saying no, right?
Yes.
So I love to help everyone, right? But I think, that's the crux of that, right? Just doing that. And I think on the other side, when it comes to the deposit, that's a big thing as well. People, I can't just pull out 20% all the time, right? But again, there's many policies, and I think this is when having like quite a deep understanding of policies, like a deep understanding of the client and the various banks' policies, and plugging them in together. I think that's sort of really important, and where we add a lot of values, because there'll be people, if they can't get pulling out that 20 deposit is hard, right? But there's a lot of banks now, and it's, back in the day, an LMI waiver, which is, you can get lending up to 95%, and you don't have to pay, LMI, which is basically a fee they charge you for taking a high loan to value ratio. Like, basically doctors were the only people who could, get away with this stuff, right? Correct, they could get this,
And they slowly start adding more professions.
But now they've added a lot of professions, and a lot of ones you wouldn't even think about, right? So that's a really important part where you can almost half your deposit requirement.
Correct.
But I think the other thing, and again, this is where you guys are super important, if you buy the right property, you can get really good valuations on these properties very quickly, which allows you to then pull out money to buy your next property now.
Correct.
Right? And again, there's a bit of sort of nuance in there. You like knowing which bank to go to for which types of properties, for which areas. But we've seen that, and we've got a system in place now, like between all of us, that we're able to almost can't guarantee anything, right?
Yes.
But we have a very high. So I don't think we've ever had a case where we haven't bought a property, and within 6 months or even less, we've been able to.
These are real results.
Yeah, real results, right? So I think eventually, you talk about it, but when you have this undeniable stack of evidence where we've been able to do it, I think that's when it becomes very real. So like on the deposit side, I think that's how we help clients as well. Like get those lower deposit loans without paying, absurd fees and rates. And then also buying the right properties where you guys are super critical, and then, us for then to, go to different banks, get the valuations with multiple banks, find out which one's the best, even sometimes challenging the valuations. We think this is too low because of X, Y, Z. I think if you understand the market and you're able to speak to that, you can sometimes increase those. So that's really critical, and that's how you solve, the deposit. So the whole picture is like, I want to buy a property, right? I need to find the right property. Bang, we got you guys, right? I need a loan. Okay, cool. Here's the loan. Here's the lender. We'll use these structures. We'll make sure you can continue to get debt. Okay, well, I need a deposit. All right, no worries. We'll do the valuations. We'll get you refinance. We'll pull out the money. Oh, you only have to put in 10%. You only have to put 5%. So between all these things, and then now you're talking about like 10, 12 variables, right? And for someone who's just trying to do it sort of with their job and on the side, I'm going to try to do this. Like I think that's very difficult, right? Because like I said, we've been doing this full time and sort of investing and researching for decades.
So many intricate details, moving parts. It can be a nightmare.
It can. So I think it's really important to have someone navigating you through that. And at the end of the day, and I always say this, I'm like, my goal is just to make the clients as wealthy as possible. Right?
Correct. Yeah.
Like we want you to continue buying. We want you guys to grow. So I think between all these things, that's sort of how we help clients on the finance side.
100%. Yeah.
We have you guys to find the good properties.
It's funny because when I speak to clients and I say we literally manage this end to end.
Yeah.
And I'm not just talking about that we'll buy a property for you. From the finance structures to how we implement the property strategy, end to end, we manage that process. And it all starts, like you mentioned, from financial structures. So it's so important because there's, like, to your point, so many intricate details, so many nuances, so many complexities here in how many different ways you can go and get a loan from a bank. that it can impact your, lifestyle or portfolio
Yeah, 100%.
in 2, 3, 5 years down the track, and it might prevent you from doing everything you wanted to do
Yeah.
in the future. So getting it right from the beginning is crucial. That's why, as you know, every client we onboard, the first thing we do is we start that financial discussion,
Yeah.
implement the right strategy,
Yeah.
we have the right structures, and
Yeah.
I want to sit down again and
Yeah.
I want to go in a lot of detail into the type of structures we can
Yeah.
implement, because we've got a lot of aggressive investors, we've got seasoned investors. They might want to scale their portfolios
Yeah.
at like a very high rate,
Absolutely.
buy
Yeah.
multiple properties,
Yeah.
build up a massive portfolio.
Yeah.
So we can look after all types of people.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's crucial here, because there's a very big difference between someone who doesn't deal with these structures on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely.
You're our trust guru, for example. So, we can get a lot of help from you.
Yeah.
Where, someone else who hasn't dealt with the structure, they might limit the same client to like half the number of properties, or
100%.
and that will basically result them, with opportunity cost.
Yeah.
Over a long period of time. They might not get to their goals. And ultimately, that's what we're trying to do, to your point. We're trying to make clients get to their goals.
Absolutely.
So I think it's just that end-to-end piece, and it's really great working, with a team that has your back.
Yeah.
And you can
100%.
confidently say that they are doing the very best, because there's no amount of financial structure meetings we have with clients. There's no limited amount of time we provide there.
Unlimited.
Because it's so complex.
Yeah.
And they need to be comfortable
Absolutely.
knowing what they're going into.
I think the one thing that I really appreciate you guys, that I think we both do, is education as well.
Yes.
We don't want to just say, oh, dude, we're going
Just
to
do this. Yeah.
I think we really want you to understand, because ultimately, what we're doing is a bit complicated, but we're not going to do it unless you understand and you're
That's
comfortable with it. And I really like your point, like on, the sort of how broad, we can sort of do it. If it's someone who just wants one property in their own name and they're happy to chill.
Exactly. Everyone's different.
Absolutely. But do we have people who have like 30 plus properties and we've done sort of a lot of stuff and they're really aggressive? Yeah, we've got that as well. So it's that end-to-end solution, as you said. And I what I also really like is, in our meetings, when we sit down with the client, it's not like, okay, I want to get an investment property. Okay, this is the investment. It's like, okay, hey, this is what we're going to do in 1 year. Okay, this is the goal for the second year.
That's right.
By 5 years, we're going to have this, this, and this done.
Yeah.
By 10 years, we're going to have this, this, and this done, right?
Yeah.
And it's not even just about, okay, this is the properties. Like, okay, this is how we're going to, buy it. This is the timing. This is how we're going to get the lending. Like, we're doing like a full, life cycle of the property.
And we're even seeing how properties in the portfolio complement each other as well.
Yeah.
And that's
very important. I think some people forget that there's actually not, you just have to keep buying one type of property.
Exactly.
Because what's needed actually evolves, and it evolves with what the market's doing. It evolves with, what the financing is looking like, and what the policies are they changing. But I think a big point which people miss, and I think which is also critical in our conversations, is, I mean, at the end of the day, you're doing all this for your life, your lifestyle.
That's right. Yeah.
So, what we also don't want to do is go and get something which just completely blows someone's lifestyle up, and now I have to, eat 2-minute noodles every night, right? It's not about that. It's about how do we help you get to your financial goal without seriously impacting
no compromise,
your personal, like, your standard of living.
That's right.
Because I think I can speak to myself. I think I struggle to like bring it down a notch, right? It's difficult, and I don't think I'm a overly indulgent person, but I think basic things, you don't want to move backwards, right?
That's right.
It's hard. So I think that's really cool as well, that you can help someone get somewhere. And I think, look, if you really want to achieve a big goal, there's some compromise involved.
100%.
I've always found it hasn't been like really material. Like, we've always been able to find a solution.
That's
where
right. Yeah.
we can get them there and not sort of detriment the lifestyle a lot.
And the main thing is, if there is compromise, people are aware.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
We have to make sure people are aware. And that's very important. Some people can go into this completely blindfolded because they don't have the right guidance.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's something we're very careful of.
Of course.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, as I said, look, you're doing this to improve your life,
That's
right?
Yeah.
And if you're going to be in a really good financial situation in 20 years, but you're going to be miserable for 19 years, we don't want that for you,
that's
right?
right.
So, So I think that's a good point, and I think it's such a big investment property, right? When you're talking like 100,000 millions of like, loans, that's a massive thing, right? And it's really important, but I think being able to explain it to them, educate them, make sure that they're comfortable, they get it, and this is what it's going to look like. They have that level of certainty, and it's not like, we're just going to do that first transaction and we leave you. No, like we said, we're here for 10 years or whatever, 15, 20, whatever it's going to take. We're with you that whole journey.
Correct.
And we're going to support you, throughout, because it isn't. Now it's not like about buying and I just sit there, right? You have to be a bit proactive. You have to be, okay, I need a better rate. I need to refinance. I need a cash out.
That's
there's a cashback offer. And, being on top of all of this stuff is what we do. Or like, hey, the market's pivoting. Now's a good time to buy. Let's move this one here. Let's move this one there. Like, I think keeping on top of that and making sure we're proactive over the years
Yes.
is also a critical piece to helping people get on top of it.
100%, yeah. And I love how you mentioned that managing that client portfolio piece. I think the amount of clients who've come to you, saying that, we want to refinance because we want to X, Y, Z. And a lot of the times the client didn't even know what's possible.
Yeah.
Because they might not be looking at the market. They're busy with day-to-day life. They know they've got some assets, but it's about making them understand that, hey, your property here might have peaked for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Or you've got equity sitting here to go and invest in this market.
Yeah.
So clients love that. And the fact that we can not just tell them that here there's an opportunity, but find the solution and execute with speed.
Yeah.
That's very crucial.
I think that's really important. And like I like what you said on that. It's like, okay, you should get this. Well, how do I get this? Right?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I think we'll tell you how to get there, right?
Yeah.
We'll tell you. And we've seen results. I think a lot of the times when people have come to me, it's because another broker has told them, or like, they've spoken to the bank or whatever, or their uncle at the barbecue, and they said, no, you can't get any more, this is max out, or no, I can't do anything, and it's sitting on their hands. And then they come to me and like, I really enjoy finding a solution. And what I found is, if you really look hard enough, there is a solution for most situations. And it's been pretty interesting. Like some of the results we've had where someone's bought a property and in 3 months we're able to get them, more like sometimes even $100,000 cash out. Like
100%.
Like,
yeah,
that is
we're working on a client right now live. Live, that they are so grateful because they couldn't find a solution with their other team members beforehand. Their brokers, whoever was giving them property advice, was saying, hey, look, you can't do anything for at least 2 years. And we're fingers crossed about to find them something for next week.
That's right. And I think it's just, there's a lot of, like, if you find the right people, and there are a lot of people out there who can help you. But I think it's just about, as he said, proactivity and opening. Okay, this person comes in. Hey, we should check all these things, right? And like I said, okay, I just bought this, 3-6 months ago. I can't do anything. Well, actually, you can do a lot, because a lot of people, I think that mindset is not quite there now. Because people think it's okay, you got to wait 2-3 years or something like that. No, it's very fast now. Things are very fast. Things are changing very quick. Policies are changing very quick.
And you need to have people who are willing to put in the time and make things work for you as well. And that comes with experience, dedication, and just working at this pace.
100%. And I think, like, one thing I like is we don't we like to work with a lot of people, and we have the capacity to do that. But we don't, if we're in a position where we're not going to be able to give 100% to each client, we need to put it on par. We'll say that. Sorry, it can't be right now. Let's talk to you in a month.
That's right.
Because, and I think there's so much that goes into it, right? Looking after that client, and we love to do that, because again, we're there for the journey, right? So I think that's really good as well. Like, we're only going to take on what we can do, and if we take you on, we're going to give you 100%. So
100%.
I think that's, because it's very easy to say, oh, sorry, we can't do anything. You got to wait a year, come back in a year, right? And that's what a lot of people have heard. They're
it's an easy way out.
And I think that's got to change, right? And I think that's what we're trying to do, and that's what we're seeing. So I think just my only thing I'd say is, like, open up your mind to the possibility, because there's a lot of things you can do that you might not have thought about. And a 15-minute conversation
could change your life. Literally change your life.
And I think it's worth the investment of 15 minutes, right? So
100%.
Yeah, I think that's
nothing. What's the worst you'll hear? No.
Yeah, what's the worst you can hear? Right? Like,
sounds like you're talking to a girl for the first time.
Yeah. And let's be honest. We don't say no very often. Right? So that's the other thing. I think it's good, and I like it. Like, I think with everything that's happening, I think we're doing some good stuff, and I'm really pleased with how we've been able to help people.
100%. Loving this partnership.
Looking forward to the future of it.
More. Cool. One last thing before we end. Do you have any predictions for the end of the year, or just some little golden nuggets you can feed to the
look into the crystal ball? Right? I always say it's very hard to predict, right? I think people have been trying to predict what's going to happen since COVID happened.
Yes.
And everyone's getting it wrong, right? So, in doomsday prediction every 3 months. Everything's going to go to zero. Well, it's not happening.
It's the exact other way, crashing upwards.
I think it's interesting, because there's so much sort of commentary on things are going to go down, and things are going up. And I found, like, a lot of people who have been telling me things are going to go down are buying stuff. They're like, this is going to go up. So look, I think moving forward, I think this year we're definitely going to see a cut in rates. I think it's well overdue. Now,
when do you think we'll see the first rate cut? Because we've gone out on the limb and said Q1.
I think Q1. I think it's probably around March. I think March is a good time. We're going to see it. I think we're overdue for it. My caution with it is, I think rates get cut when inflation has been brought under control. On paper, inflation is under control. I still think there's a lot of work to do there. So I think there's a bit of stress in the economy, but I do think we're going to see those rate cuts. And look, in terms of property and property prices, you might be a little bit better to sort of comment this, but I think we will see some corrections this year.
Yep.
But I think it's going to be in certain pockets because
it's all markets within markets today.
That's right. I think a lot of the growth which has come in properties now, it has not been sort of intrinsic, but it's been led by forces of economics, which is demand and supply. You got low supply,
Correct.
and everyone wants to buy. So those areas which have experienced a lot of growth just because of this, insufficient supply and like too much demand, I think those areas will now start to correct, and the money's going to move into different places. But I think the area, sort of the right areas, and when I say that, I mean just getting the basics right. Good infrastructure, proximity to sort of cities or things like that. If you're getting those, I think there may be a slowdown, but I think they're still going to continue to grow. And I actually think it might be a small lull, and then it's going to pick back up. I find it very hard to sort of imagine a future where property prices actually come down materially. Like
we always see your 5-10% correction, and then you find literally a year or two later they're new all-time highs. Because just the foundations are there.
And I think that's the short term. Whenever you look at property on the medium to long term, even if you have that 5% correction, most times you'll see it come back, right? So I think having the ability to hold the property over a long term, that plays a role. But in terms of
how do you feel about the more expensive price points? Because those are the kind of locations or types of properties we're more bearish on, or we're just staying away from. Because to your point, inflation is quite heavy under the hood. It's not really decreasing, it's just increasing at a slower rate. So, price points 1.5 million plus, we stay away from, regardless of supply levels, just because of the affordability metrics. Inflation rates aren't ever going back down to COVID levels. You might see 3 or 4 cuts over the next 18 months, fine, but they're still going to be very unaffordable for a longer period of time. And if the economy slows down, if there's any weakness in employment, unemployment spikes, I think those are the areas to be more cautious of. Generally, thoughts on price ranges?
No, it's a good one. And I think when I talk about price points, right? And I have I've got a full spectrum of clients. People are earning right at the upper end, people at the lower end. And I find throughout the spectrum, like even before we get into sort of the economics of it, buying a $1.5 million place is just super challenging, right?
That's right.
Like not many people can afford that, so they're kind of forced to look in that lower option. But I think what's also really important is, there's kind of this inverse relationship between property price and rental yield, right? So as you buy a more expensive property, your rental yield drop, right? Because technically there's supposed to be more capital growth perspective, right? But I think again, if you don't have cash flow, the repayments are very heavy on you. You can't save, right? If you can't save, you can't save up for another deposit, right? And that property is not, and then people talk about negative gearing, right? Negative gearing is a very Australian concept. Look, there are advantages, but I always say negative gearing, you're still losing money, right? So
we always say it's a function of a property investment. It's not the goal.
It's not the goal, because you're getting maybe 40 cents on the dollar back, right? So, but you're still losing that money.
100%.
So there's certain situations where it might make sense, but I think predominantly that's something to be aware of, because I think cash flow is now important again. Because the standard of cost of living is high, you need money in your pocket. You can't afford to just keep chucking out these big repayments. So
that's right.
Most of the activity I've seen is actually being in that sub $1 million market.
100%. And
I see people who want sort of a blue chip asset, right? I want something premium. Well, if you look at 700 to 1 million range, in certain places like Brisbane, for example, you're able to get quite a nice property there in 100%. That range, right? Like you don't have to. When people think blue chip Sydney, then you're talking like 1.5 plus, right? But there's plenty of places you can still get that and access at that lower price point. And then coming back to cash flow, like I think that is very important. If you want to have multiple properties, you need to sort of, if you stay in that sort of, the golden zone I saw for a little while used to be like 300 to 600, and it's creeped up a little bit, maybe
because
like
it has to creep up.
So like maybe 400 to 700. That's where we see most of the activity. Because
that's right. From an investor perspective.
From an investor perspective, I should clarify. Investor perspective, but most of the activity we're seeing right now is probably 450 to 1 million, and that's a very active sort of zone, and so that 600 seems to be a nice sweet spot, because the properties you're getting there, you're kind of able to get something where you're close enough to some pretty important sort of infrastructure where you'll see that capital growth. But then you're also looking at yields of, sometimes 4 or 5%. And some of the stuff, you guys are able to look into, talking at 7 or 8%, right? So then if you've got those properties, you've got capital growth opportunities, but then also sometimes neutrally geared. Neutrally geared in this economy is a pretty big achievement, I'd say, right? When you're talking about paying 6.5 or 6% interest, right? So I think that piece is very important. So for me, I'm not seeing much activity at all above 1.5 mil. I think if you can afford to to do that, then you're probably not in a position where you really have to think very, very closely about your property portfolio. You can just go and buy that. But I think I have a similar view where I think most people have been bearish on that just because of the toll it puts on their lifestyle.
Correct.
How expensive it is, and also I think it's hard to get the right property in those ranges as well. There's not a lot of stock sometimes, and it's tightly held. So,
I think we agree with all of the points you made about the predictions, and overall, it sounds very complex.
Yeah.
If you're just listening to this for the first time, or you're looking to get in property, or you're just listening to someone, like you said, the barbecue, and taking some advice, it can go terribly wrong.
Yeah.
And that's why like 70% of investors still lose money today. So it's important to just have a conversation.
Yeah.
See if, people like us can help potentially.
100%.
We have your best intentions at heart. So we'll do this again, man. It was really great talking
100%,
today.
100%, man. Like, thanks for having me.
I want to make sure that we can get more in depth into the amount of financial structures we can work on to help clients rescale their portfolio next time for sure.
We'll save the good stuff for next time. Yeah.
keep this coming back.
Stay tuned. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. No.
Thanks, man.
Thanks,
Great
man.
having you.
Appreciate it, man.
Cheers. That was good.
Cut.